Welcome into Overtime, presented by McDonald's. Dewey, Dailey, along with John Bruce for today's episode. John, week 8, just a day away. We're that far into the season. It seems like just yesterday we were previewing all the week 1 games, and now we're just 3 games away from playoff time. A pretty interesting week in week 7. Some interesting outcomes and some interesting games coming up in week 8. Should be a fun episode here on this Thursday.
Yeah, time flies when you're enjoying yourself.
Yep.
I believe that's the way the phrase goes. But yeah, it's been 7 weeks of football. It's been, we've seen some teams kind of go a step above others and others that are about 18 to 19 steps behind. But, but hey, it's a process. So for the programs that are at the top, that it's taken them that process to get there. The teams that are at the bottom, one of which, I'm going to talk about in one of our previews, is they're not at the bottom now, but it's a team that's made their way up is somebody I want to highlight in our preview. So yeah, it's should be a fun episode.
Yeah, 9 streams for us in the first 7 weeks, so we've been getting around a little bit.
Yeah.
Assuming it will probably only stay 2 games above the amount of weeks we've done, because I don't think there are any other like Thursday or Saturday games coming up, and really the only other chance we would have would be like for the playoffs.
I hate
if
that
it
the
was
playoffs.
Friday, Saturday.
I hate that the playoffs aren't like that. I mean, you've made it to where everyone gets in the not everyone. Most of the teams get in the playoffs. Yeah. If you've won 3 games, you have a pretty good chance to make the playoffs. Why are they all on Friday?
Yeah.
It's just, we're short on officials. Okay, so we're gonna put bad officials on some of these games?
Right.
Like, come on.
Doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I know that the reason is because college football is Saturday, which I get, but still, like, you don't have to make it. You don't even have to make it that many. Just make it smaller.
You can make it Thursday, Friday,
right?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, hopefully there aren't any playoff games that are canceled because of referee shortages.
I would think that they would be okay on that.
That would be pretty wild. But for today's episode, we'll pretty much do the normal stuff. We'll review some games from Week 7, talk about some impact players, talk a little bit of playoff as we get a little bit closer, and then we'll preview some games in Week 8, and then obviously wrap up with our power rankings, which have like 0 meaning. But there was some. Hey,
someone brought it up to me the other day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Our power rankings?
Yeah, my specifically.
I think
Yeah, so I mean, someone's watched at least. So, and I know Sir Brock's got some people fired up on Friday when they got put out, or Derek's. I don't know. They were put on. It was put on Derek's like header, but I think it was still written by Brock, so it was kind of weird. Whatevs.
Yeah, it wasn't ours, so it's fine. I just thought it was funny.
Yes.
So we'll start off with some game reviews from Week 7. And John, if you want to start us off with some SVC action, a pretty big comeback, Paint Valley at Piketon.
Yeah, so if you would have told me before the game that Paint Valley would beat Piketon 49-30, I'd be like, okay, I can see that. If you would have told me they'd been down 24-0 with less than 30 seconds left in the first half and would win 49-30, I would not believe you.
49-6.
49-6.
That's over
the last 24 and a half minutes of that game.
Ridiculous.
Piketon jumped out to the quick lead, and like they don't kick extra points, and they went 3 for 3 on 2-point conversions in the first half, which is pretty impressive. Buddy Wilson scored twice, and then Brent McGuire scored a long touchdown to get the Streaks out to their girthy lead. 24-0. Thank you. I like to expand the
vocab.
Yeah. Girthy. Good word. So then right before the half, Preston Fauber connected with Carson Free for a 47-yard touchdown pass to get the Bearcats on the scoreboard. Made it 24-8 at the half. Start the second half. Piketon had the ball, then a short punt, and Preston Fauber ran for a long touchdown. Piketon had the ball, short punt. Preston Fauber ran for a long touchdown that made it 24-21 at that point because they missed the 2 on the second one, kicked the extra point after.
Did Fauber come from Hillsboro?
Yes, Fauber came from Hillsboro.
So. Yeah, I remember.
He played like the second half of the year last year for them at quarterback, and then went into Paint Valley after that.
Also, he transferred last year,
After
over the winter.
Yeah. And then, so this punt wasn't as bad for Piketon, but Carson Free broke a big punt return to start inside the Piketon 30, where Braylon Robertson gave them a 28-24 lead on a touchdown run. Then Piketon's last score came on an 84-yard hook and ladder play to get Buddy Wilson a score, made it 30-28 to go into the fourth quarter. After that, it would just be all Bearcats, though. Robertson scored twice. Fauber added another score for the 49-30 lead. I believe only one possession for Paint Valley started on their side of the field, like on the negative side of the field in the second half. So not only were they just overall dominating, but they were getting the ball in good position. Their defense stepped up huge, and really just, took control of the game. 49-6, like we said, in the last 24 and a half minutes of that game. Preston Fauber threw for 81 yards and a score. He also ran for 157 yards and 3 scores. Robertson had 131 yards and 3 scores. Carson Free had 75 yards and a receiving touchdown. For Piketon, Buddy Wilson had 160 yards total offense with 3 scores. And Luke Gallion threw for 264 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Red Streaks. Both teams, it gets slightly easier going into this week. For Piketon, they are, we talked about the playoffs. They're in a tough position because right now they are 21st in the region because the teams they played at the beginning have just haven't won. They'll need to win out and get some help. Right now with 7 wins on Fantastic 50, they're at 20% to get into the playoffs. They have Southeastern this week at home. They're currently favored by 37 in that. So they should get back into their winning ways. Paint Valley, they face Huntington in a rivalry game. Huntington just came off their first win of the season.
A rivalry game?
Yeah, it's for the Maple Leaf Trophy, which at least for the last 15 years has not left Bainbridge. So it's a trophy that Paint Valley has dominated, but it's still a rivalry. They connect through Blaine Highway. So so that'll should draw a big crowd for Paint Valley in that one before they get 2 really tough ones to finish the season with Unioto in week 9 and Zane Trace in week 10. They are already in the playoffs. They could lose out and they'll be in at 6 wins. But they've got a chance to get up around the 2 or 3 seed in their region. So would be favorable for them to keep winning. So they've done a really good job. Their defense has not played as well in the first half the last 2 weeks, but the last 2 weeks, despite giving up 35 and 24, so 59 points in those 2 first halves, they've only given up 13 points since then, or in the second half of those games. So they've made some good adjustments, and we'll see how that carries over here in week 8.
Well, I saw that Gridiron Glory put out it was a graphic. I don't know if it was today or a couple of days ago or whatever, but it showed because their coverage area is pretty similar to ours.
Yeah.
I know they cover
they cover a little more TVC
Hawking, which we really don't. I know we live streamed with Eastern, who's actually ended up being one of the better teams in their area. But in terms of our area in the SVC specifically, Unioto, Paint Valley, ZT have already clinched the playoffs. In terms of in the hunt, looks like they have Piketon and Westfall both at a 14% chance. Huntington is at a 26% chance. Adina at 21%. Chillicothe at 25. Some other teams in our area, Jackson West, Bloom-Carroll, you can kind of count. Fairland, I believe that is Vinton County's logo is clinching, which I think they're 6-1. So they've had a pretty good year as well. And then Nelsonville-York is on there.
At worst, they'll finish 8-2, which we'll get to see them in person.
And then a couple other likely in the hunts. Gowie is on there, which I'm surprised they haven't clinched already. Waverly's on there. I'm assuming that's Colgrove because I doubt that's Circleville. So
right.
I'd say that's probably Colgrove. And then there's a red Indian logo. I'm not sure if that's Hillsboro.
I bet it is Hillsboro because they've done well for themselves so far this year.
And then they've got like Wheelersburg with a 97% chance. I think we're all kind of assuming they're going to make it. They have Courthouse at an 89. I'm kind of surprised by that. I didn't think Courthouse would really.
I would say that's probably a little longer after the beating that Hillsboro
It says
gave them.
playoff percentages courtesy of Fantastic 50. So, but yeah, I should say 3 SVC teams are already in the playoffs with clinched spots. Oh, and Miami Trace has also clinched a spot as well. So, but back into
they got 89% right now, and they need to finish 4 and 6 to clinch a spot as Courthouse.
Well, they're not going to beat Miami Trace, I wouldn't think. And then I think they have.
They got McClain and Chillicothe. McClain's playing well. So we'll see.
Well, actually, we'll talk about their game here in a second. But in terms of, I know we mentioned Bloom-Carroll for a second. I'm surprised we didn't see Logan Elm on that list. We may have, and I just looked over it.
Yeah, they're definitely in already.
I would assume so. But another game review from week 7. It was one that we live streamed. It was Bloom-Carroll at Logan Elm. 35-6 win for the Bulldogs. It was the 8th consecutive win for Bloom-Carroll. One interesting thing about that meeting was it's now been 8 straight for Bloom-Carroll. Well, prior to that, it had been 8 straight for Logan Elm. The last win for Logan Elm was 2015, I think, and then the last win before that, this most recent win streak was like 2007. So it's been back and forth. Most recently, not so much, but in the last 20-ish, 30, 25-ish years, it's been pretty even. But Bloom-Carroll pulls out with the win. I think this was one that we were, kind of hoping it would be a little closer with, it's hard to compare these teams because Bloom-Carroll not directly in our area. I mean, we talk about them a little bit when they play teams like Logan Elm or Fairfield Union.
I believe it's next year. We won't talk about them at all because they'll be the OCC.
Oh, they are going to the OCC? Them and Taze Valley are going then. Because I know Taze Valley
are. Maybe they're not.
I know Taze Valley is going. I didn't know Bloom-Carroll was.
It may not be.
But
if they're not, I'm sorry.
I don't know. I knew Taze Valley was. I didn't know if Bloom-Carroll was. But it was a big night on the ground for Dylan Armentrout. Had 26 carries for 251 yards. That was a new school record. And also had 3 touchdowns. One of those was from 92 yards out. Quarterback Ethan Thandanavong had a passing and a rushing touchdown, and the one passing touchdown was to Michael Stevenson, who, I will say, in terms of like tight ends, those were probably 2 of the better tight ends we've seen this year in Cameron Red, and then I know we haven't talked or seen Michael Stevenson too much, but I would assume his numbers are pretty solid because he also had the tipped pass. Well, actually, no, he had the interception, didn't he? Yeah,
on a screen that he sniffed out.
Yeah, but a big target for Thandanavong. The same can be said for Red. But for Bloom-Carroll, they head back home. They take on Taze Valley for week 8. For Logan Elm, Aaron Walters, he only had 1 touchdown and had 2 interceptions, but he threw for 262 yards, was 26 of 42. It was a tough night on the ground for Landon Thompson, had 16 carries for only 44 yards. That's 2.8 yards per carry. Cam Smith, leading receiver for them, had 3 catches, 71 yards, had that 1 touchdown. I think it was a 39-yarder. It was on that first drive out of the second half. Logan Elm looked pretty promising. They a lot of tempo. I think it was either a curl and go or an out and up. It was a double move, and Walters did a really good job selling the fake, and Smith was wide open down the near sideline. But it does get a little bit easier next week for Logan Elm as they stay at home and take on Amanda. So that'll be a good game to. I don't really think it was a case of them losing their footing or anything. I think it was just a case of them going up against the best defense they'll probably play all year. Now, obviously, they'll get Hamilton a bit later on, which, I can't remember exactly what week Bloom-Carroll plays Hamilton.
They play week 9.
But I would assume Logan Elm Hamilton in week 10 will be the second place game because, I mean, like I said, I haven't seen Hamilton.
That Bloom.
Yeah, Bloom-Carroll looked pretty solid. Really the last couple weeks, Thandanavong hasn't had to throw. I think the game in week 6, I think they played either they played Fairfield Union. He was 8 for 8 for like 200 and some yards and 4 touchdowns. So like he just hasn't had to throw. This was the case here. They got up early. I don't think they attempted a pass in the second half.
They did not.
You know, and I think the Fantastic 50 line was like, I think it was like -20. I think Bloom-Carroll was favored by 20 points. So obviously one we were hoping would be a little bit closer, but it's just one of those things where it's Bloom-Carroll is just kind of a step above. And that's pretty much why in the previews I picked them in almost everything. Now, obviously, boys soccer, they're not going to win. As a matter of fact, I think they're going to finish third behind Taze Valley. And then for volleyball, for volleyball, it looks like they're going to win. I think girls soccer, they're going to win. And then football looks the same as well. They're just, you know.
They're in a really good spot athletically right now. And like you mentioned that, you know, Logan Elm had won the series for
8 years in a row.
Here's the crazy part. Bloom-Carroll didn't make the playoffs until like 2016.
Well, now I'm telling you that
now they are like, they've made it. They've won 3 straight regionals.
Yep.
They switched coaches 2 years ago, and they have not missed a beat. Like, and it's not like Wade Bartholomew's struggling at Olentangy. I think they're going to be like the 1 seed in his second year up at Olentangy, and like they've just like, and they were like a machine because it was just like they just went and did their job.
Yep.
They didn't do anything showy. The only time they celebrated was when they scored.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the final was in Logan Elm's last win over Bloom-Carroll? It was 2015. What do you think? I said it on the stream. I'm guessing you probably didn't hear me, but what do you think the final was?
Just because your face right now, it makes me think that it was crazy, but I'm going to say 42-41.
Logan Elm beat Bloom-Carroll 52-7.
I knew it was going to be.
And then it was proceeded to lose 8. Has now lost 8 consecutive years. Now, like obviously, you can lose a lot of personnel, and I'm assuming. But and the thing is that Logan Elm team only went 6-4. They lost to Zane Trace that year. Who else? They lost to Amanda, which Amanda was like insane just up until a couple of years ago. So that was 2015, 2016. They went 6-4. 2016, 4-6. But they beat Zane Trace that year.
I bet one of those. That's got to be one of the last years that Coach Bartholomew was there.
Maybe.
Because he went and helped his son Wade at Bloom-Carroll after that. So I bet that's part of the reason why they dropped off a little bit.
I would just expect an 8-game win streak to be preceded by a tight game, not a blowout.
Yeah.
But, you know, here we are. I think this is one of the better teams Logan Elm has had in the past, you know, handful of years, at least in my memory. But, you know, still bigger things ahead, right? You got to finish out the season. Still a great chance to go 9-1 and get a good playoff seed. Yeah, I know we've talked about how they're not in the same areas like a Unioto or a Waverly, so there's probably not a great chance to see them matched up. Which really seeing Logan Elm play like play a Waverly or a Unioto would be pretty interesting to me, because I think those are two teams that, just by kind of looking on paper, are pretty comparable. So it'd be interesting to see how they actually matched up. But once again, still bigger things ahead for Logan Elm. I don't think this week should be too big of a problem. You have Amanda at home. I'm assuming they play like Fairfield or Liberty, all Taze. So Taze is not. I mean, I know their record isn't great, but still got to come with your A game, and then obviously Hamilton, a big game in Week 10. I mean, that game will be, you know, senior night for them, so I would assume they'll be ready to roll for that.
I believe they're locked into a home game already. If they take care of the next 2 weeks, they're 92% home. If they go 9-1, they're 100% home and 94% twice. So they'd probably be in the top three or four seeds if they go 9.
You're not going to win the league unless Bloom-Carroll was to drop to Taze Valley and then lose to Hamilton, and then you went out.
Probably not outright. You might be able to get a share if Hamilton can get them.
Right.
But this is what
we've had him in our top. Well,
yeah.
Well, I don't remember where I had him at first. I think I may have had him at 6 week 1. We've had him in our top 5 power rankings.
They've been going up
pretty much the entire year.
Yeah, so. I was impressed with them. I thought, you know, I hadn't seen a live football game there in a long time. I like they treated us well. The bands were really good.
No, I wasn't gonna say the halftime show was like insane. Like you don't see, like, it usually depends on, like, once you get into schools like a Portsmouth West or, any of the other smaller schools would do. Their bands really aren't that big.
Yeah.
But I mean, here's my thing. Anytime you see a band that has the hats with the feather on top, they mean business. Like those bands don't play around, and really neither one of those did.
Yeah, I was really impressed by them.
If you were there in person, it was a great show. If you saw it over live stream, you know, wasn't as good. But
yeah, but it was still very good. You know, I was impressed with them. They brought out some
props and stuff. Yeah, and then I think it was one for Bloom-Carroll. One of the kids took off his hat and gave a little, whatever it was, a trombone or a trumpet solo. It was pretty cool, but yeah. There was some interesting stuff going on at halftime.
Glad to see they got some, got the well-deserved attention. They work just as hard. I mean, seriously. I watched, so I played soccer, and we went to a high state camp. Me and one of my buddies went to a high state camp, and they were, I believe there's like 3 hospitals where we were doing the camp now. Like, it's before the James was as huge as this. And the Ohio State Marching Band, which obviously is, the best dang band in the land.
Best daggum band in the land.
They were practicing, but they were doing a dry run. So they didn't have their instruments. And like, they were just like, we're just sitting there watching them, like, because they were so good, but it was just so much. So, it just.
Well, you literally have to have eyes in the back of your head, and you have to trust that everybody else is going to be in the right spot at the right time. Because, I mean, you really can't worry about anybody. If you start worrying about somebody else, and that's when something. I mean, I can't really speak by experience, but just by watching other people do it. I mean, and they were like, I couldn't really see it because during halftime I went in because we're set up on top. I went down in, but they were like. They were acting something out, and I couldn't tell what it was, but I'm sure if I went back and watched, I could probably tell. But, yeah, great hospitality at Logan Elm. We talked about if they beat Bloom-Carroll and, had a chance to win the league Week 10, potentially going back, probably not too likely now.
Yeah, we're probably going to go to somewhere where a league championship's on the line, for sure.
Or just maybe a good game. We don't know. Week 10 is still up for grabs, so.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So, moving on to our next game review, McClain winning their first FAC game since September 28th, 2018, as they beat Chillicothe to end a 5-year FAC losing streak. They win 20-17 over the Cavaliers. McClain now sits at 5-2. They do need a win in their last 3 weeks to get in the playoffs, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But Sean Smith started the scoring off for the Cavaliers with a short touchdown run. They ultimately went ahead 10-0, but then the next 20 points of the game were scored by McClain. 3 touchdowns on super long drives. The first one, 11-play, 80-yard drive, capped off with an Andrew Potts short touchdown run right before the half. Then coming out of the half, they had a 13-play, 85-yard drive to open the second half, which was capped off on a 7-yard run by Caden Penwell. And that made it 13-10. At the 5:28 mark left in the game, Drake Stapleton on a 4th and 10 connected with Max Eikenberry for a 19-yard score, made it 20-10. McClain, that was another 10-plus play drive. I believe it was 77 yards. So they really, their ground and pound game is very strong, and they obviously were able to do it in that game as well. To make it 20-7 or 20-10, Chillicothe would score late to make it 20-17, but they were unable to get the ball back as the Tigers were able to run out the clock on their first FAC victory in 5 seasons to move to 5-2 on the year. Talking about, playoff scenarios for them, it's kind of a long shot if they don't win, but this is something I'll throw out there. So, the Cincinnati Hills Christian Academy game, they were picked by Fantastic 50 to lose by 12. They won that game by 2. They were projected to lose by 27 to Miami Trace and only lost that game by 9. They were projected to lose by 15 to Chillicothe and won that game by 3. So even though they're projected to lose by double figures to Washington this week, Jackson in week 9, and then Hillsboro in week 10, I wouldn't I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for them to win one or two of those games. I mean, Jackson's going to be a long shot because they're
Jackson.
Yeah. But, they're a team that they could get Washington at home, in Hillsboro for the Rotary Bowl is at home as well. So those are big games for them coming up. Like there's a possible week 10er at McClain,
Oh, Hillsboro.
Yeah.
Now we've talked about that one a little bit.
Yeah, because that could be big for playoff points for both of them. So, 5 wins for McClain. They haven't done that in a while. It's I say that they did go 4-6 last year, 4-5 the year before, but before that they had not won 5 or more games since 2012 when they went 7-3. So it's been a while for them to be successful. They've only had one other winning season in the past 15 seasons, so it'd be nice for them to get a 6th win. And their Chillicothe, they had a season where they went 1-9. I believe it was in 2009. I think we might have had someone on staff that played then. He might have been
who?
Chillicothe. He might have been graduated then. Derek.
In 2009, you think he may have still been?
He might have graduated
in high school. I would think so.
I don't know.
How old is he? Like 30?
He's a little over 30, but
Brock just turned 31, didn't he?
Yeah, something like that. So we'll see. I don't pay attention to those guys. But for Chillicothe, it's a rare down season, but I think with Coach Bart and his staff, they've lost a lot of close games. I mean, a 3-point game to St. Charles, who's 4-3, a 3-point win against Logan, then a 6-point overtime loss to Hillsboro, who's 4-3, and then that 3-point loss to McClain, who's 5-2. So, I mean, they're not very far from possibly having 4 wins. So it's a rough season for them for sure, with a lot of injuries, but not all negatives for the Cavaliers as they move into week 8 and beyond.
So sticking with the FAC, this is our final game review from week 7. It was Hillsboro. Check that. It was Washington Courthouse at Hillsboro. The Indians took it 36-6. I would assume that prior to this, Courthouse was probably favored. If you look at Fantastic 50, I would think Courthouse would have been favored in this game.
By 19.
By 19. I maybe didn't think that much, but still, I would have figured that. When I saw this score, it definitely surprised me a little bit.
Very impressive win for Hillsboro.
But Courthouse is now 3-4. They're still winless within the FAC with losses to Jackson and now Hillsboro. And it's not going to get a whole lot easier as they have to go to McClain on Friday, who's coming off of a 20-17 win over Chillicothe. And then they lost to, or did they beat Miami
lost to
Trace?
Miami
They
Trace.
lost Miami Trace.
Yeah.
They lost what was that? It was like
29-20.
But for Courthouse, and I think there was a lot more that went wrong for them than just this in this game. To lose by 30, there's a lot of stuff that has to go wrong, but the turnovers have been kind of tough for them so far this year, especially for Gavin Kaufman, who now has 15 interceptions through 7 games. Anytime you're averaging 2 picks a game, it's going to be tough to get your offense going. We've talked a ton about how you have I wouldn't say. Well, it's not too many times you get a player like Rocky Jones on your team.
Right.
That's like once in, not even once in a class, once in a 4-class span. If you have 4 classes, you're lucky to get a guy like that in just one of those. But like I said, 15 picks in 7 games. Now, if they're able to clean that up, I think they have enough talent around. We've talked about Haithcock and a couple of the other guys around there that can make plays. It's just when you're handing the ball over to the other team, it's going to be tough to get any kind of momentum going. And once again, they are at McClain this Friday. They were 19-point favorites this week. I'm sure they'll be underdogs going into that game, so maybe they can flip the table a little bit. And I'm not sure the last time they finished a season under 500, but
we're talking
Washington Courthouse.
It was actually 2021. They went 4-6, but
okay.
But they went 9-3 last year.
Right.
Yeah.
So right now they're under 500. They're going to need to win at least 2 of these last 3 just to finish 500. Which obviously they're going to play McClain and then Miami Trace week 10, which that's not going to be easy. And then week 9 they must play Chillicothe.
Yep.
So I would say, and for me, I use Fantastic 50 for a lot of the lines, which clearly against Hillsboro didn't matter a whole lot for them. Mm-hmm. But I would assume McClain and Trace, they're probably over one score underdogs.
They're actually a 10-point favorite over McClain. Wow. Right now, they're an 11-point underdog to Miami Trace.
Well, if they're 9s over McClain, they're probably like 15 or 16 over Chillicothe.
5.
They're less of a favorite over Chillicothe than McClain?
Chillicothe is still rated very much above McClain.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Well, maybe
I think it's because strength of schedule in there, but
that is true. Chillicothe's played a tough non-league.
At some point, there has to be results.
Right, you can't use strength of schedule as an excuse for the whole season.
Right, you gotta you've got some really talented people. You've gotta I don't understand how these teams that have guys that are getting big time offers and stuff are struggling the way they are. There's got to be some disconnect in there of, with these talented players, you got to find ways to get them the ball.
Right.
And let your playmakers be playmakers.
When for Courthouse, personally, I haven't seen them play,
right.
So I don't know what goes on in a game. I can only speak from seeing box scores.
I'm not surprised Hillsboro won, but by 30,
right?
Yeah,
because. And we'll talk about him in a minute, but Austin Barrett has just been ridiculous his whole career,
right.
Especially this year.
So, if you look back, something happened in that fourth quarter against Monroe for Courthouse.
Right, yeah.
Because, they're tied. They're leading going into the fourth quarter. They lose by 27, which is unbelievable. Then you got Jackson. You're going to probably lose that more times than not. So, you lose by 4 touchdowns there. But you lose by 30 to Hillsboro. So, it's just, It's turned bad in a hurry for McClain, or not McClain, but for Courthouse. The good thing for them is they do have some games where they can get right.
Mm-hmm. But you were talking a little bit of 2018 for McClain. There's a little bit of 2018 for Hillsboro as well. First win over Courthouse since 2018. Not only that, it was the first time since 2018 that Hillsboro has had more than one FAC win.
Nice.
So 2 FAC wins for the first time in 5 seasons.
I'm going to go ahead and say I am guessing I know who they beat the last 3 years. As, McClain hadn't won. So,
and then, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but 4 interceptions for Hillsboro in that game. One of them, Nick Burns, returned for a 40-yard pick six. So once again, for Courthouse, if you can just limit the turnovers, I think they have enough players. Mm-hmm. And they've, typically Courthouse has guys.
Yeah.
You just got to be able to put it together, and if they're able to clean it up a little bit heading into these last 3 weeks, I think they could beat McClain. I think they should beat Chillicothe, and if they come to play, it's at Miami Trace, but that's probably like a 5-minute drive.
Right.
They could compete with them, and I know Garrett Guess has missed a couple of games as well with, I forget what is something with his knee or whatever, but he didn't play this past week against Jackson.
Just go with the hockey injury, lower body injury.
Yeah, lower body injury.
Yeah.
So if he is still out at that point, because with Trace already clinching a playoff spot and probably out of the FAC race, they may choose to just maybe sit him and play for the week 11 and potentially 12 game. So if he's not playing, that increases their chances a little bit. But just hopefully able to clean it up a little bit on offense and
so for
get it going a little bit.
One thing for Hillsboro, currently, even if they would lose out, they are a 97% chance to make the playoffs. So they've done what they've needed to do so far. We've talked about them a lot. We've been impressed with them.
We've probably talked more about their losses than their wins.
Yes. Yeah, they've had some impressive losses, but this was a really impressive win for them. The more wins, if they can get up to 7-3, which I don't know if they can do that, because I don't know if they can beat Jackson.
Well, so we'll just go ahead and jump right into the impact players, because my first one rolls right off of this game. Austin Barrett, a player that we had a little bit earlier on. I think in that game we had him maybe week 2 or 3. It was 355. Well, this week he has 303 yards with 4 touchdowns in the win over Washington Courthouse. He holds the single game record with rushing. Well, it must not have been 355. He holds the single game rushing yards record with 330 last year in Week 4 against Williamsburg. I think he has also tied the single game rushing touchdowns at 5, so only one away from tying it again. But you kind of got to it a little bit before me. Going to be a tough week for Hillsboro. They got to take on Jackson. Now, it is at home, so I'm not sure how much that will affect Jackson, other than instead of playing on turf, they'll be playing on grass. I do think Hillsboro kind of has a cool setup with how their bleachers are like on a hillside. Yeah. That's kind of cool.
Played a lot of soccer there.
But, this would probably be one of the most impressive wins just of any team this season if they were able to knock off Jackson. I mean, you got to stop Barrett because they're going to feed him. Now, if Jackson is able to do that and they're forced to throw, similar to Courthouse, I haven't seen Hillsboro play, so I'm not sure how comfortable they are throwing, but the run game is definitely there for Hillsboro.
Yeah, so that should be a fun matchup. I mean, like you said, it's a really cool setting there at Hillsboro. Their schedule's crazy this year. I don't know if you've paid too much attention to it.
Well, I know they played Western Brown, and then they played somebody else non-league that was really good.
West.
Oh, yeah, Portsmouth Western. They scored like 34. 30, yeah, and West defense is...
Yeah, if you score 30 on West, that's pretty good. But no, that's not even the part I mean is the crazy part. They played 2 games at home, 4 road games, 3 home games, and then a road game to finish the season. So it's like they're like on homestands.
Right.
Like
a weekend series at home. And got to go on a little road trip. And would you say 4 consecutive away games?
Yep.
Yeah, that probably gets a little...
now they're in the midst of a 3-game homestand.
Nice.
Yeah, so moving on to, and we kind of did this last week with
Portsmouth's defense.
Yeah, some SVC players, just in general. The SVC, not a ton of defense has been played this year.
Big 12.
Yeah, it's a Big 12 with like Unioto throwing out a couple shutouts. But, so I just want to highlight some different players. Huntington wins their first league game.
Wins their first game.
Yeah, wins their first game overall, just dominates Southeastern. Noah Potter had 157 yards passing, 105 yards rushing, and accounted for 5 touchdowns in the game.
Big fantasy day.
Yeah. DJ Crocker had 132 yards rushing, 73 receiving, so over 200 yards all purpose.
How many catches did he have?
I don't think he had that many because he had a long touchdown reception. And then he had 2 total touchdowns. So, congrats to the Huntsman to win that. Your reward is to go to Paint Valley. So,
yeah.
But you know what?
Yeah.
It's they played with Zane Trace for pretty much 3 quarters in week 6. So it seems like they're starting to get going in the right direction. For them. So that's, with Potter and Crocker, 2 seniors, really good athletes. They've both had some nice years, and I know that they're both in the, the top 10 in the SVC and a couple different stats, which that'll be updated a little bit later in the week. But
who did Southeastern beat?
Southeastern beat Madison Plains, 27-7.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, so
27-6.
Oh, okay, my bad.
And then lost to the should be top 10 Eastern Eagles, 36-20.
Yes.
In Beaver.
Yes, it's hard to win in Beaver. It's been hard to beat them anyway. This year. 7-0,
and big one this week, which we'll talk about.
Right,
or you'll talk about here in a second, but.
So then moving on to the next one, Newton Hoops had 6 touchdown passes, 343 yards passing. Both broke his own school records.
Yeah, I was going to say he's done that a couple times this year for sure.
Now he only played 1 series in the second half in the third quarter, as they brought in David Long, who's probably the quarterback next year.
Unioto. They're
still
in good hands.
They're still in pretty good shape. But yeah, Newton Hoops owns pretty much every record passing the ball for them. He's got one more record to go. He would have to go nuclear to break that this week.
Was it like all career passing touchdowns?
No, it's passing yardage in the season, which he would need like over 400 this week. I don't think he can do that.
Who has that record?
Mark Workman. Mark Workman, graduate of Paint Valley High School.
For single season, so okay.
Your dad would have had a much better first season if Mark Workman would have stayed at Unioto for that year.
Yeah.
But they were not very good, and Paint Valley was good, so he took off down the road.
Don't blame him.
No,
I mean I'm pretty sure
he went and played college. Probably was getting a little more serious looks at not going 0-10 this.
Yeah, probably not.
But his brother actually, I think, had Paint Valley records for a while too. He ended up going there, and so moving on past Unioto on that, they had both Blake Hoops and Ashton Grace had over 100 yards receiving in that game. Then moving on to another one, which was Riley Hartsaugh for Zane Trace, had over 200 yards rushing. Normally you hear Blake Phillips, which we'll talk about a little bit later too. You're hearing a lot of Blake Phillips. Aiden Dunn-Silas Stewart have been good in the receiving game. Mm-hmm. Hartsaugh started off, or he'd had a couple of decent years as like the third or fourth running back.
Yeah. His sophomore year, he had more rushing attempts and yards than his junior year. I'm pretty sure. So
and so I don't know if there was an injury or something last year where he didn't run the ball very much, and then this year he started off pretty slow, and then down at Piketon,
we kind of knew with Langley out and Phillips was in at quarterback that somebody was going to have to actually play the running back spot, and he did a great job doing that.
And he's really done well so far. And I mentioned another one, Buddy Wilson from Piketon, had 3 scores, 160 all-purpose yards. I typed porpoise, all-porpoise yards.
All-porpoise.
Yeah. And then a couple players doing it non-offensively. Caden Cutright had a punt return. He now has 3 punt return for a touchdown, obviously. He now has 3 scores that are non-offensive of the year to go with his 7 receiving touchdowns. But he is not first in the SVC in non-offensive touchdowns, as that is Trent Walters of Westfall, as he had a 72-yard scoop and score for their first score against St. Trace, which apparently was a controversial play, but hey, you play through the whistle, and he did it. He also had a 100-yard pick 6 against Madison Plains early in the year, and he had 2 kickoff returns for touchdowns against Southeastern in week 6. So Trent Walters has done it in a lot of different ways. I know I talked about him last week he's a kid who steals 20 bases a year in baseball, and I know he's close to 500 yards receiving, if not over it. So there's some impact players across the SVC for week 7.
Yeah, one final impact player we have down is Gavin Richards of Nelsonville-York, a team we hope to see on live stream here in a couple weeks when they host Vinton County. But in the win over Wellston was a pretty lopsided game, 46-12 win for the Buckeyes, 17 carries for 129 yards, 3 touchdowns for Richards. Nelsonville-York is now 6-1, 3-0 in the TVC Ohio. Relatively, I don't want to say easy because you got to come to play every week, but they're at Alexander this week. Alexander 2-5, so I would assume they're going to handle Alexander. Alexander's the Spartans,
yes,
correct? I wasn't sure, but a big game at. I found out Dave Boston Field is the name of their field. Pretty nice complex from the pictures I've seen. They have turf, and it looks to be a pretty well put together place. Big game in week 9 for Nelsonville-York. I'm sure we'll be previewing that one next week, hopefully as our live stream game of the week. But they will host Vinton County. Presumably both teams should be 7-1 and have perfect 5-0 records within the TVC Ohio, as Vinton County hosts River Valley this week, who is still winless. So I would assume Nelsonville going to beat Alexander, Vinton County going to beat River Valley, and potentially we could have a TVC Ohio League title game a week early in week 9. Should be a good game. One common opponent these two teams had. I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but Vinton County and Nelsonville have both played Trimble. Vinton County, if I remember correctly, handled Trimble pretty well.
Easy.
I'm pretty sure
it's 26. I think.
I think it was by a score or by 2 or 3 scores. and then Trimble actually beating Nelsonville-York. Now, if I remember, I think that was Nelsonville's first game of the season. So, like last year, we saw West lose to Fairland week 1, and then West never lost again. Yeah. And then one playoff game. Did they win 2 playoff games?
I think it was just one last year.
Just one. Didn't they get matched up with like Ironton in the second round or something?
Like not cool.
But yeah, not very cool at all. But yeah, hopefully that'll be a good game next week. Gavin Richards, a big impact player for them in week 7. Wouldn't expect that to change much in week 8. And hopefully not too much in week 9 either, as we're hoping to get a nice little competitive game there.
So one thing about Nelsonville, and we don't talk about them much.
I know volleyball.
We've covered them for different things. So like for volleyball, girls basketball. But over the last 15 years, they're coming into the year. They're 109-54 in football. They have a regional championship in that time.
Well, didn't they won a state title in like 1981? I think I saw. And
it's a really proud program.
I think Dave Boston was the head coach.
Mm-hmm. He was a longtime coach. Yeah. So I mean, Nelsonville is a, like I just said, a proud program. They've coming off an 11-2 season last year, 8-4 the year before. They've had some recent success. They're a very good program, and it's hopefully we can see them in person in week 9. But if you're a standout for them, that means you can really play.
Mm-hmm. All right, so some game previews for the upcoming week 8. Let's take a look down at Spartan Municipal Stadium as the Eastern Beaver, Eastern Pike. I'm not sure. The Eastern Eagles.
The brown Eastern Eagles.
The brown,
they're not the green Eastern Eagles because Notre Dame already had some trouble with them.
Yeah. The second time Notre Dame has been matched up with some sort of Eastern Eagle. This time it'll be the Eastern Eagles of Beaver. Little week 8 SOC 1 action, undefeated. I think they're both unbeaten in the league.
Undefeated in league play.
Notre Dame has lost
2
games. I knew they lost to Eastern Reedsville, but
they lost to Reedsville and they lost to Williamsburg, I believe, who I don't think has lost. Let me pull it up right quick. Yeah, they lost to Williamsburg, who's 7-0, Eastern 6-1.
Yeah, so, I was going to say, I know Eastern is one of the higher rated teams in their area. So
I'll tell you what, though, don't get behind Notre Dame because they will just keep scoring.
Yeah,
they have a 72 to nothing.
What was it to Manchester?
78-6. Yeah. Now
the only Shack OHSA affiliated school just got bullied like that. Yeah. Like, come on, we need more Shack football.
Yes, but games like that don't help.
No. Yeah. I just want some Friday night American football shaction.
Yes. So one impressive thing, though, I mean, after they lost the 2 straight games to Eastern, which you can check on YouTube if you want to go back and watch it.
Say that again?
The Eastern game. You guys
Notre Dame, yeah.
They lost to Williamsburg the next week, and then they played South Gaia, who came in with a good record.
That was like a Thursday night game, too, or Saturday. It wasn't Friday.
Saturday game. As we had, partially talked about doing it, then we remembered that Ohio State and Notre Dame were playing at the same time.
Yeah.
We're like, well, probably not many people are going to watch that.
We'll catch them the week before, and then...
Yeah.
What did we even do week 5? Oh, that was Piketon.
Mm-hmm.
Wait. No, that wasn't when Notre Dame and Ohio State played.
It was.
No, it wasn't, because week after we did Notre Dame, we did Waverly and West.
Yeah, and the week after was...
Oh, the week after.
Yeah, you silly goose. So, South Gaia is...
So, what did we do week 6?
Was
that West and Menford? Okay.
Yeah. South Gaia goes into Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was not very nice to them, beat them 40-6. So South Gaia is still projected to be pretty competitive against Eastern. So I think it's got Eastern as a 9-point favorite in that one. But, just kind of going over some of the players. Jordan Davis is, the go-to running back.
Yep.
For the Titans, Ethan Kingery does a good job at quarterback. Chris Piccolo. He said only a freshman, right?
Yep. 2 touchdown catches in the loss to Eastern.
Yeah. Bryce McGraw and Luke Cassidy. They have a nice offense. They can really put it on you if you
let them.
Yeah, if you let them. Eastern, though, when we talked about programs on the rise, Eastern has been a varsity OHSA affiliated program for 9 seasons.
Okay.
They're 7-0. I mean, you're starting from literally the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And they've gotten to the point where they've got a chance to have an undefeated season in a real conference.
Right.
It's, they're not playing the Sisters of the Poor.
Right.
That's
right.
Yeah. They've done a good job. Dylan Morton at quarterback, 14 interceptions, 14 touchdowns.
Somebody else has 15 interceptions.
Yeah, 14 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions on the year, 951 yards. Also does a good job running the ball. Landon Rhinesmith, 864 yards rushing, 12 touchdowns. Receivers on the outside, Jace White, 7 touchdowns. Tegan Warner with 3, but 373 yards, and I believe he's got 26 or 27 catches to lead them. For Eastern, they are 4-4 in their history against Notre Dame. They've had 1 official winning season. I don't know why I said official. They had 3 years at 5-5. Those are why wouldn't those be official? Those are 5-5. They went 5-3 in the COVID year. Overall, 33-45 coming into the year, but 40-45 as a program. I would guess out of the schools that have started football post 2010, that's got to be up there with one of the best win percentages. And really, 2021 they went 1-7, and that's really the only year they've been not very good.
I don't even know who else is just.
Well, I'm just Manchester has, but they've not had success.
Well, it's tough when you literally don't have a conference to.
Yes.
I mean, you're just scheduling whoever will play you. I mean,
and that's
because you have to find teams that are playing non-conference in the second half of the season, which.
Right.
I mean, I know Waverly has Mount Healthy week 10, but I mean, you're not going to get that a whole lot. So you pretty much have to find other teams that are in some similar boat that you're in.
Well, for Manchester, Fayetteville's also in their league, but Fayetteville just didn't have a team last year.
Well, they're not OHSA either.
I think they're back this year.
Are they? Oh, so we have 2. So we could have Friday night action, potentially Fayetteville and Manchester.
It was last week.
What was the score?
Fayetteville 22-12.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had larger margin. I mean, last week.
But Fayetteville does have a couple wins. They beat, obviously Manchester, but they also beat New Miami. New Miami, who has 1 win, but it was a forfeit win. But the only reason I know that they have a team is because Eastern played them. Eastern beat them 39-13. So, this is a big matchup. Eastern is one of those schools that, we don't get to see a whole lot because they don't play big schools, really.
Well, they don't play anybody extremely low. So, if we were going to watch, we would have to go to a Notre Dame or,
right.
I'm not sure if they scheduled, if they keep Huntington on their schedule, we could potentially see them at Huntington next year.
Yeah.
I don't know what their schedule looks
Right.
like, but.
Yeah, so Eastern's they've done well, for starting from the ground up, and the fact that they're 7-0 at this time is really impressive. And you know what? Why not go win? Why not go beat Notre Dame? They're 4-4 against them. They are small underdogs on the road, according to Fantastic 50. 4-point underdogs, which means it's almost like a pick 'em because you got 3 points at home. They win this game, they're going to go undefeated.
Right. I mean, the only game on their schedule that raises any concern was the one against Southern.
Yeah.
50-49 at home against a team who only has 1 win through the first 7 weeks. But, you got the win. Take it, move on. It was non-conference, so, whatever.
You're not, ideally, you play very well every week. But if you're a Division 7 school not named Marion Local, you're probably not going to have every week where you're very healthy and that machine can just keep rolling. So, get a win. Get a win and move on. They score a ton of points. They've been held in the 30s 3 times. Obviously, all were wins, but 31, 36, 39. They've scored 43, 50, 43, 49. I would say this is going to be a high-scoring game.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree.
if you're available on Friday, get out there and support these two
Probably
schools.
The biggest game in the SOC 1 this year.
Yep.
All right, so we'll take it to the SOC 2, Waverly at Wheelersburg. Now Waverly 5-2, 3-1 in the SOC 2. Had the one league loss to West that came quite literally down to the wire. They also had an early non-league loss to Miami Trace, which, if I'm being honest, I think if they played this Friday, Waverly probably beats them. And I think if they played 10 times, Waverly probably beats them. I think Waverly has come along a little bit since that game, especially, I mean, has Jace Hurd had under 100 rushing yards in a game after week one?
Week one was bad, but
I mean, if you took the alternate rushing yards and put less than 20 on that, you would have won so much money.
Yes.
And he had, well, I think it was like 13 carries for 15 yards. If you bet that he would have had under 20 yards against Miami Trace, especially looking at like defensively what Miami Trace has done recently defensively, like it would have been like plus like 2,500. Like the odds would have been insane. But they had a 33-7 win over Memphis in Week 7 following the loss to West. The one thing I will say is they're catching Wheelersburg off of a week where they didn't play. No game in Week 7 for the Pirates as the Oak Hill game was canceled. You know, for Wheelersburg, I think within Wheelersburg, at least like for like the Pirate faithful, there's a little bit of internal panic because they're 3-3, which isn't something that they're totally accustomed to doing.
Yeah.
But when you have losses to Ironton, Jackson, and Harvest Prep, it's like, or not Prepped, Harvest Prep.
Yeah.
It's like, come on now. Like, those are schools where if you beat them, you'd be bragging about it. So, like, if you lose to them, it's like, okay, like, those are really good schools. They're all playoff schools, and they're all probably, like, Week 13 teams, and potentially, like, Ironton made it to the finals last year. Jackson probably good for a couple, maybe 3 playoff wins. And, I mean, Harvest Prep, I know, didn't Harvest Prep beat Wheelersburg in the playoffs last year? So, I mean, those are deep playoff caliber teams. Like, I still expect Berg to honestly win out and win the SOC too. I know it was week 1, but really in terms of our area teams that have played Ironton, they've come the closest. Once again, I know that was week 1, and I know they lost to Jackson, who got, you know, to say nicely, whacked by Ironton when they played them. But yeah, I mean, the one silver lining for Waverly is you're catching them off of a week, so they haven't played in 2 weeks. So maybe you catch them a little rusty. You know, we've talked a ton about, you know, Mason Kelly, Cody Swords, already mentioned Jace Hurd. There's a lot of other guys like Mason Sparks and Mason Pollard who, you know, are huge alternative options. Obviously not Kelly. Obviously Swords, as you know, if you just look at the catches, has been kind of the main target. But Waverly with a ton of options. We've seen their defense step up in a couple different games. They just held a team in Minford who offensively is like not that bad. They've got a couple good athletes with Caudle, Pika, and you know they've got a pretty solid receiving core as well. So they hold them to 7 points. I do think Wheelersburg wins. I would guess Fantastic 50 probably has them as like a 3-score favorite. Now it is at Wheelersburg, which only helps the Pirates a little bit. I should say a lot of bit.
Right.
But once again, I do think Wheelersburg wins, and I do expect them to probably win out and win the SOC too. However, big game week 10 at Wheelersburg when they take on West, who as of now seems to be the top 2 teams in the league for the second year in a row.
Yeah, for Wheelersburg, they are 14-point favorites in this one.
Okay.
Let's say
not as high as I thought.
Yeah, let's say Waverly wins this game. They've got Northwest, and then they're done league-wise. So, just throwing out there, well, if
they win Wheelersburg, that more or less like clinches a share.
Well, if Wheelersburg would be
Wheelersburg be right.
So, but they
can be a three-way share.
Yeah, Waverly still has a chance to get a share of the SOC2 title. Yeah, and it's going to be tough, but seems like you're going with Jace Hurd, and then Hurd opening things up for Mason Kelly, and those wide receivers could see something that hasn't happened to Wheelersburg since the 60s.
Go under 500.
Yep.
Right.
They've won at least 5 games every season since like 1969. So, yeah.
Records? Well, I guess that's really not a record. I was going to say records are meant to be broken, but that's not really a record,
Right.
but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, for Waverly, the same. We were talking about Courthouse a little bit earlier. I think for Waverly, especially in big games, just kind of turnovers. I mean, they had like 5 against West and still only lost by 4. So, I mean, if you can just limit the turnovers, you turn the ball over against Wheelersburg, you can just probably just get on the bus and go home. Because Wheelersburg, like in West's case, they were able to hang around. Like West didn't really make them pay for turning the ball. Wheelersburg is probably going to make you pay for turning the ball over. So, limit the picks, limit the fumbles. And you can say that for every week against any opponent, but that's, if you do that, that's the best position possible to pick up a win against Wheelersburg.
True dat.
And
then finally, our streaming game of the week, which I don't have notes for. I ain't doing notes. Zane Trace at Unioto.
Did Kenneth should have got us a ZT helmet.
He should have got us a ZT.
We could have had like a little game day set up right here. Just take everything off the table and just put those two helmets next to each other.
That is a missed opportunity.
I know, and I guarantee you, Kenny has his helmet from when he played, or at
least could have found a way to get one.
I
bet
Kenny's a good negotiator. I bet he could have got one for us.
Our cameraman Kenneth Hay is
the man.
Oh, he's so good. If you like what you see in our streams, it's because he
learned from the best.
Yes, thanks, Carson. But yeah, it's so Zane Trace coming in with a 5-game winning streak. Now sitting at 5-2 on the year with 3 wins in the SVC, while Unioto is 6-1 on the year with 3 wins also in the SVC. They're on a 4-game winning streak. This game last year, I believe it was under a minute left when Zane Trace took the lead to win 34-31. Unioto finishes 9-1 on the regular season. Zane Trace finished 10-0 on the regular season. So slightly down a little bit, I guess. I don't know, but they're both really good still.
Just in terms of the non-league, last year, obviously Zane Trace didn't play Waverly, but they beat Logan Elm by 2 scores. It was like a 17-point win, and then obviously Unioto handled Waverly last year, and then fell to them this year after leading 14-0.
Yeah.
So just a little different outcomes in the non-league for both teams, but really within the league, it's been a lot of the same.
Yeah, they've, Zane Trace, maybe they've given up a lot more points. Now, Zane Trace's game against Piketon was very similar to what Unioto did against Piketon. It's just Piketon scored 2 scores late against Zane Trace when, the game was all but over. But the Adina game is the one that really stands out to me. Zane Trace winning 49-39, where Unioto won 52-0 this past week. But man, Zane Trace they figured out what they're best at, and that is running the football. Now, a lot of that comes from they had to. Carter Langley, who threw 17 touchdowns, 1 interception last year as a junior, has had a lower body injury that he's been dealing with for the last few weeks and hasn't really been able to play. He can still go in and throw the ball, but where he was super dynamic last year was also being able to run it. And then Gunnar McCullough got the start in, I believe, week 4 in that Adina game, and he got banged up and wasn't able to throw the ball for a couple weeks. He started last week at quarterback, but didn't throw very many times. And then Blake Phillips, who's been there, I would say probably was their fullback last year, is, their main ball handler or ball carrier this year, played quarterback. And he would be at the top of the SVC in completion percentage if you went by, if you limited how many passes, because
minimum 1 pass attempt
per game. Yeah, he's 10 for 12 on the year. So he did a good job stepping in the Wildcat. And overall, they found some things that are working for them. So running the ball with Phillips, getting behind their big physical line, and also Riley Hartsaugh, which we mentioned earlier, has done a good job for them running. And it's a it's a big physical team. Spencer Brower has blocked punts in back-to-back games for them. Aiden Dunn is just a crazy athlete that can do a lot of different things. Had 179 yards receiving in week 6, and that was a game where they were not throwing the ball downfield. It was a lot of the jet sweep stuff. So, for Zane Trace, if they can really pin their ears back, run the ball, and have that open up things in the passing game, I think that's going to make them a lot more dangerous offensively in this game. For Unioto, it seems like their defense is really rolling right now. They've, I don't know why I said 3-0 both teams. Both teams are 4-0 in league play.
Week 8.
Yeah, in week 8. So for Unioto, a lot of it goes with Newton Hoops, but they've taken advantage of what the other team's given them. Last week, Adina put 7-8 guys in the box, so they didn't have to run the ball. Against Piketon was prepared for Unioto to air it out. Well, they gave it to Connor Dawson, Ethan Summer, and ran all over Piketon. So they've done a good job of adjusting to what the other team has taken away. So it's for Zane Trace, that's going to be something the coaching staff's got to really look at on how they want to try to defend Unioto. Because if you take away the pass, they're more than capable of running the ball. Connor Dawson's right around 6 yards a carry on the season. Sumar's done a good job running. James Reinhardt's another kid that's came off the bench and can run the ball at times. Newton Hoops can still do it on the ground. But in the passing game, you have Hoops throwing to Blake Hoops, Cody Braden, Caden Cutright, Ashton Crace, all guys that have caught passes for over 50 yards on the year for a score. They are very dynamic through the air, but they also, KB Perkins caught a touchdown pass a couple weeks ago. They've just got a bunch of different guys that they can go to at different times. So it makes them very difficult to stop. I think this game will be decided in the trenches where, you have Unioto's defensive line might be their best defensive line they've had really since around the mid 2010s. Marcel James, Shannon Newell are nasty at defensive tackle. Will Fleck, KB Perkins really good at the defensive ends. Bryce Jarvis, Ben Griffin, other kids that come in do a good job. But defensively, offensively, they're also going to have to slow down Spencer Brower on the attack. Bryce Johnson is a freshman who's going to be a monster. He's had a really good season so far at defensive end for them. But I think this is going to be a good game. 2 really good kickers. Actually, 3 really good kickers because the Harrington kid does a good job kicking off for Zane Trace. And then
Judah
Hanks doesn't miss extra points. And then
you could say, doesn't Unioto have like 3 kickers?
Yeah, they have 3 kickers. Yeah.
Does Haynes doesn't kick off, does he? Or does he?
He kicks off on occasion.
Okay.
But usually it's been Rocky Reinhardt. Then Liam Matthews kicked off a little bit as well. Matthew hasn't missed an extra point when he's been in. And then Haynes has missed 1, but I think it might have been a bad snap on that. But he's 4 for 4 on field goals. He hit another 32-yarder last week. They had set up from 39, but it was a bad snap and ultimately didn't get to try it, which would have been a career long for him, even though he's more than capable.
I forget. Oh, it was, what was the kid's name for Bloom?
Ridiculous. It was McKee was his last
name.
Trenton McGee? Trenton McKee.
It wasn't Trent. I'm sorry. I can't remember it. McKee for Bloom-Carroll. That's the best kicker I've seen in high school, period. Never seen it. I mean, he's booting, what was it, like 50 yards? I mean, he's taking one step from like 35 yards and drilling it with.
Well, so his first kickoff was a little low. He definitely slipped on it, and it was a touchback. His second kickoff landed about 2 inches from the back line of the goal.
His PATs were nearly landing out of the stadium.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just
it's
bombs.
such an advantage. So when they would score, Logan Elm would start at the 20.
Every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
But so I think this is going to be a really good matchup. I think it's going to be
Trayton McKee.
Trayton. Okay.
Best kicker I've seen in high school in my entire life. And, we didn't get to see him attempt a field goal, but I'm convinced that kid could have kicked a 60-yarder. If the snap and hold were good and they blocked long enough, I think he could.
Yeah, he might have to get an extra step on it, but yeah,
well, he was taking about a 10-yard run up on those from midfield, but yeah, a ton of leg power. Yeah.
But yeah, so this game, I think it's going to come down to the trenches. I know Unioto's been, people have said they're not physical enough. So we'll see if they are physical enough in this matchup. Because if they can match the physicality of Zane Trace, I think they've got a really good chance to break through and give themselves a really good look at a gold ball.
All right, so we'll wrap it up with our power rankings. I'll go ahead and go first just to get it out of the way. I saw Lou Holtz dropped us 5 spots in his power rankings off the bye week. So I'm just going to say our power rankings for high school football matter more than Lou Holtz's do for college football. Nobody cares about Lou Holtz.
He's just a bitter old man at this point.
Literally. I saw that, and that's just, whatever. Anyway, Ironton still in the 1 spot. Now, I did move Logan Elm a bit down out of the 2, maybe a little bit more than you did, but I'll explain that once I get there. Jackson and Fairland actually moved Wheelersburg down as well. And it's kind of the same thing. I moved them down after a bye week, just like Lou Holtz did, but not 5 spots.
Right.
So Ironton in the 1, Jackson in the 2. I bumped Fairland up to 3. Wheelersburg in the 4. Now, if Wheelersburg beats Waverly handedly, I'll probably bump them up. Depends on what Fairland does. I have West in the 5 over Logan Elm in the 6. Now, the reason for me doing this was, once again, I do my power rankings based on who I think will beat people. I think West has a really good defense, one of the better defenses in our area. I think that game against Wheelersburg is going to be a lot better than people anticipated, preseason and even week 1. And then really for Logan Elm, now I know we're talking about Bloom-Carroll, and I know we're talking about a kid and Dylan Harmon-Trout who just set the school record in rushing yards, but the run defense wasn't great for Logan Elm, and Mason Parker is without a doubt probably, a top 5-ish back in our coverage area. So I think West and Logan Elm would be a pretty good game. Right now I'm putting West over there, and they both have 1 loss on the season. For the 7 spot, still have Gallia. They've still done pretty well in the OVC losses. They haven't played Ironton yet, have they? But a loss to Fairland. It was really close enough that I think they deserve to stay in the top 10. I don't remember who they played this past week. I know they won. I'm assuming it was Chesapeake or...
Chesapeake was Portsmouth. Might have been Colgrove.
Potentially. I know they won because I saw our standings, and they still only had 1 loss. And then 8, Waverly went over Minford. No reason to move them around. Unioto, big win over Adena. 10, still have Vinton County. On the bubble, I have Zane Trace, Paint Valley, Eastern Pike. It is 11, 12, and 13. I think if Eastern Pike goes undefeated, it's kind of hard. I should probably have Nelsonville-York among those just on the bubble as well, because if Nelsonville-York beats Vinton County in a couple weeks, they'll probably jump in. And once again for Eastern, if you go 10-0, no matter who you're playing, you kind of have to finish somewhere in the top 10. Winner of Zane Trace and Unioto this week. Either Unioto's probably, I know Waverly beat Unioto, but if Waverly were to lose to Wheelersburg and Unioto handles Zane Trace, they probably jump up a little. If Zane Trace beats Unioto, it'd be hard not to have them in the top 10. Paint Valley finishes out the season with Unioto and Zane Trace. If they win probably just one of those games, probably see them in the top 10. So a lot of teams are on the bubble that could potentially jump in. I believe those are the only teams that I had right outside that could make the jump. I mean, a couple other teams like Minford and McClain probably at this point couldn't get into the top 10. Miami Trace, probably not. Portsmouth at this point, you're going to lose probably to Gallia, Fairland, and Ironton. Hillsboro I still have on there.
It's a terrible way to finish the season.
Yeah.
Especially since they've been playing pretty well.
Well, I didn't mean they may. I think have they not played any of? Are those their 3 final games?
I think they might.
I was just saying that because I'm assuming if they've played any of those 3, they've already lost to them. But the OVC is tough just because of those 3 teams. Those are their final 3.
Fairland, South Point, and Ironton.
So they've played Gallia.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming
50-18.
Yeah. So.
But I mean, they're so young. And they're 4-3, so that's pretty good for them.
So I would say the teams that are outside my top 10 that could potentially finish within are Zane, Trace, Paint Valley, Eastern Pike. Throw Nelsonville-York in there. If Hillsboro wins out somehow, maybe, but you're going to have to beat Jackson this week, so it would be tough. But, yeah, I think those are my top 10, and whatever I named, like 4 or 5 teams that still have a chance to finish. Any team I said didn't have a chance or didn't mention, I know I have Wheelersburg with 3 losses in the 4, and, like, even Unioto with, or not Unioto, sorry, Waverly with 2 losses at 8. It's quality of loss, and once again, it's who I think will beat who. It's just kind of how it is. And,
true that.
I don't want to like hurt anybody's feelings with my top 10, but
oh my gosh, you big pansy! I can't believe you just said that.
I hate everyone.
There you go.
I don't care what you think.
So going to my power rankings, Ironton stays at 1. Jackson at 2 moves up to 2. I just moved Logan Elm down 1 spot. Even in the loss, I liked what I saw overall from them. I agree with you on the running game. Having a really tough time stopping the run because Bloom didn't throw a pass in the second half and didn't have to.
Right, yeah.
But I like what Aaron Walters can do. I think against a team like I think Bloom's just pass rush was just. And maybe that's
Park
showing.
Trooks, was just pressure on.
Yeah,
and I think Stevenson was on the other end.
Yeah,
and they actually had 8 D linemen that rotated, according to Coach McKinney. So just fresh legs all night.
Yeah, so I kept them in my top 3. I think it's going to be a tough end of the season because it's still with Taze and Hamilton Township, but I could see them staying in that spot for the rest of the regular season. I have Fairland at 4. I have Wheelersburg at 5, West 6. I do think that Wheelersburg West game is going to be dynamic.
I wish it was at West. I wish it was at West. Maybe we can work. Man, we might just have to try as hard as we can to get that game. Because, man, that'll be a great game.
I have Gallia at 7. I have Waverly at 8, Unioto at 9, and then I still have a tie for 10th between Paint Valley and Benton County. I think with... I think with, Paint Valley, I was very prepared to drop them, but 49-6 in 25 minutes is ridiculous. So against a team that's going to finish over 500 too in Piketon. So,
I would say I probably, on my list, I have ZT at 11 and Paint Valley at 12. I'd say I would probably flip those and have Paint Valley as the first team out just because they've looked a little more.
Then my first team out would be Zane Trace at this point. And then Eastern and Nelsonville, like you mentioned, it's not a perfect science or anything. It's just kind of just based off what we've seen. We've seen some really good teams this year. So.
When we say it every week, it's based on how you perceive teams should be rewarded, whether it's by the record, quality of win, quality of loss, who they've played. Everybody's top 10 is different. There was a time where Brock had Unioto at like 2, and I think we had them at like 7 and 8. Yeah, it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
So, to start the season, I think I had Logan Elm at like 6, and Brock had him up at like 2 or 3 right away, and it's just different. Or like how Brock had, I think it was Piketon at like 8, and I'd never even had him in. Yeah. So it just, I know now he has Benton County at 7 or 8, and I have him at 10. So everybody's are different. It just depends. And I would say whenever you see a team in person, it probably affects your thought of them. Because like if they lose a game, but there were a couple, like in the box score, we can't see that this kid was overthrown by an inch, and if he would have caught it, the score would have been this. All we see is an incompletion.
Or like Mason Parker had a 62-yard touchdown called back because a lineman was a foot across the upfield on a play that was not even remotely close to him.
So there's just some stuff that being in, like I haven't seen Gallia. I haven't seen Ironton. To be honest, I don't really need to. Same thing with Jackson and Wheelersburg.
So, like, for me, I think I'm most impressed with Fairland because putting up that many points against West, who we've seen in person twice, and just be outstanding defensively. So. Right,
yeah. But, yeah, 7, 8, 9, 10 were the same. I just don't have a tie between VC and Paint Valley. We have the same teams. They're just different orders. At this point in the season, it's probably going to be a lot of that. Early on we had like I had Notre Dame in mine, and I don't think you ever had them in yours. So
I had Eastern at first, but then that 50-49 game, I dropped them out.
Southern, what is it? Racine, and they're actually
Tornadoes.
They're in the.
They're in the TVC Hawking.
Hawking. I thought, man, that what is that? That's Waterford, Eastern,
Southern,
Belpre,
Federal Hockey, who doesn't have football.
No.
They've had it before, but I don't think they have it anymore.
Marietta's not in there.
Marietta's not. They're in a different league. Marietta's in with Warren.
There's one team.
Point Pleasant and Fort Fry.
There's one team we're missing because I think there's 5.
Well, it was South Gallia, but they're out.
It's Eastern Reedsville. Uno momento, por favor.
Por favor.
Por favor, mi hermano.
Thanks. Gracias.
Waterford. Trimble.
Yeah.
Trimble's who we were missing. So Southern, Belpre, Trimble, Eastern, and Waterford. So only, what did I just say? 6 teams?
Yeah, I thought they had like 9 at one point because they
had
had
1, 2,
they had
3, 4, 5. I only counted. They only have 5. They play 4 league games.
Yeah, they had Wahama, which was in West Virginia.
Well, you lose.
They
South
had Federal
Gallia.
Hockey at that point.
Yeah, 5
and then they had
teams.
South Gallia, so that's losing 3 teams. And
Yeah, 4-week league schedule. That's got to be the lowest. And like,
well, I just mentioned one that only has 4 teams in it total.
Who?
The Twin Counties League or whatever. It's Warren, Marietta, Fort Fry, and Point Pleasant.
Oh, so well, 2 of those are old SCOAL. I don't know if Fort Fry and whoever else was. But
no, Fort Fry is literally from us to the camera away from Waterford. And there's a waterway in between there. And so Fort Fry is in the East District and Waterford's in the Southeast.
Also, Belpre has 6 points for and 87 against this year. I just saw that. That's pretty cool.
What?
Belpre has...
There's no way they only have 87 points against.
Sorry, that's league. They have 19 points for.
That's
371 against.
Yeah.
They're 0-7.
They don't play much defense
or offense. They have 19 points.
Okay.
They average.
I'm gonna talk about something.
They average like a touchdown a game.
Yeah. So they're the Golden Eagles. Do you know what color is not in their color scheme?
Well, I see they're orange, so
Yep.
probably not gold. The eye is gold.
Is it? Oh, there we go.
Oh, no, it's white. I lied.
Okay, yeah.
Silly guys.
Yeah, Golden Eagles. They are orange and black.
I mean, Unioto doesn't have gold in theirs, and they say that's one of their colors.
Yeah.
That's not gold. That's yellow.
Your dad had his Vegas gold ones.
Yeah, upstairs. Those are cool.
Yeah.
I don't think those were ever official helmets. I think if I remember right, he told me he had those made to present them, and they didn't go for it, so he just kept them. But I've always thought like purple and like Notre Dame gold. I mean, if you really think about it, like navy blue and purple are like pretty close. So just like think Notre Dame uniform, and that's what it should look like. But
I'll see you.
Whatever. The uniforms now are cool, but
yeah,
it's purple and yellow, not purple and gold. If we're being honest, but
well, now it's black and white. They barely use any purple.
Yeah. I mean, I forgot they had the black. Hopefully they wear those Friday. That'd be kind of cool. What are they?
They are.
Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. I mean, this don't come out till Thursday, so it's all right.
Nobody watches anyway. Yeah, especially to this point in the show.
All right. Well, unless you have anything extra, any players, any extra games, any extra thoughts.
Game not to watch. Millersport and Fisher Catholic this week. Millersport is currently ranked the worst team on Fantastic 50. Fisher Catholic is projected to win by 39, and they're one of the bottom 20 teams.
Well, Notre Dame hammered them, if I remember right. Yeah. That's what we should do. Games not to watch, but just have it be teams not in
teams
our
we cover.
Yeah, not teams we cover. So like we can all just have a laugh and nobody gets their feeling. Or like we could do games not to watch and it's somebody in our area playing a bad team somewhere else that like we think they'll hammer. But that'd be a fun little segment.
Yeah, that's McDonald's would probably say no.
Yeah, we'd probably have to find another sponsor for
Yeah.
for the show if we
It'd
did
be
that.
sponsored by the Whopper or something.
Yeah, sponsored
Big
by
Mac, Big
Carl's
Mac, Big Mac.
Townhouse.
Yeah. All right, there you go. That's not a corporate.
Right. Sponsored. What else could we do? Krispy Kreme. There we
There you
go.
go.
They'd be all for
the
that.
real Krispy Kreme with
Yeah,
C's.
Double C, boy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've had enough
Yes.
jargon on
Yes.
today's episode. All right. Well, with that being said, that'll do it on today's episode of SOSA Overtime, presented by McDonald's.